Hello and welcome to CTN. To learn more about the show, please visit ciotalknetwork.com. And our topic is stitching seamless digital journeys in a minefield of threats. So the way things are going on, especially when organizations are trying to do things related to digital transformation, they are looking at ways to improve the overall digital experiences, which in turn means that you will have different technologies and platforms and applications to work with each other and integrate. And that these things keep changing as part of the transformation effort. Now, that is a great place for an intruder to exploit, which means the risks could go higher. Now, when that means is we will have to fundamentally rethink how do you make cybersecurity and as part of the DNA of this transformation, that as we go about transforming, as we go about creating the newer experiences for the users, we do not create cybersecurity risk, or we do not undermine or jeopardize the operational workflow. So to discuss this, I have with me Prasanna Kumar Burri. He's the Chief Information Officer with Dangote Industries. Hi, Prasanna, how are you?
Sanjog, good morning. How are you doing today? I'm doing
Very
great.
good. Great to have you. Now, as I've said the context, so first thing that comes to mind when you are doing any digital transformation effort, businesses are looking for reasons for you asking for that extra funding and extra support when it comes to deploying cybersecurity to the next level as part of your transformation effort. So first thing that a leader like yourself has to do is to make a business case and at least explain the increase in complexity that would come with the digital transformation effort. So what's your pitch to the management?
Sanjog, it's a very touchy subject for sure. And one advantage that we have on our side nowadays is that a lot of people are already sensitized, especially at the senior echelons, the executives at the board, the senior management, some external stakeholders. Everybody is pretty much sensitized. And in varying degrees, sometimes even oversensitized. Everybody is on edge by the time they've seen many government agencies, some very large corporations getting hacked.
So, Prasanna, my first question for you is about building a business case. So imagine when you are going into your executive committee's meeting and you're being asked that why is being the cybersecurity budget proposed to be higher or requiring investments in areas which we never did before. What is your response? What are you doing to actually explain to them the difference in regular transformation or regular cybersecurity related protection to when you're going through a digital transformation? And what is the scale and complexity doing to the cybersecurity threat surface, if you will, which is requiring you to think differently and ask for more or variety of budgets and or make a different use case or a business case compared to the business as usual?
Great question, Sanjog. In our line of business with IT, it's always tough to get the funding based on the type of business we are in. So, but cybersecurity has made it somewhat relatively easier compared to the traditional IT investments due to significant awareness that we have among the stakeholders, executives, internal and external, already have a heightened level of awareness on cybersecurity, considering the significant incidents that we have seen in recent times. So we don't need to fight too hard to explain to people how dangerous and how threatening the environment is. But the threats don't always translate into direct dollars in terms of investing, so you have to go through the entire journey of ratification, justification, so on and so forth. So we usually mark some allocation for cybersecurity related activities. But the recent times, we see areas like artificial intelligence that have become more dominant. The AI is perhaps the biggest threat for us in the information security domain, in terms of exploits, and also in terms of people, insiders trying to use more of those. So there's generally, a significant increase in knowledge and awareness of what's going on. It has become relatively easier, if I must say, to explain, and always, as a technology executive, we need to relate to the mindsets that we have upstairs, the people that are approving, and we have to often prepare for even, at least, often people get worried if you go and ask them in the middle of the year for special initiatives. We keep those minimum. So the best thing that works is plan well ahead, as much far ahead as in advance. Prepare their minds to what is coming, knowing that we won't be able to turn things around very rapidly, very quickly. So we keep a planning horizon, at least 6 to 12 months into the future. So it gives us a good way to socialize the planning, mobilize resources, study the markets. But there's always some emergency slush fund, so to speak, that you need to tap into. But so far, so good. We never had to engage into such tapping in.
So in continuation with my previous question, so great response to what you would do to make a case. But now behind the scenes, you also know that, okay, you got what you wanted, right? The business gives you what you want, but then that should also be such that it not only helps you plug the holes that might exist today or some short-term vulnerabilities you may have, but also it kind of makes you future fit. My question to you, do you think there is a magic bullet like that? Or there is some intermediate level solution which will allow you to eat the cake and have it too, because especially the cybersecurity landscape changes. And even as you go about digital transformation, newer things will evolve where you want to innovate. And that could change the very attack surface for the intruders.
Right. Sanjog, there's no magic bullet. And the nature of cybersecurity industry today is there's always a moving target. The threats are evolving, the technology behind threats is evolving, and we're even scratching the surface as I see it. Very soon we are going to have technology that can break encryption with quantum computing. Quantum computers are already becoming a thing. They're beginning to get commercialized by some market leaders. So once quantum computing comes into play, it's going to be a mad rush akin to what we have seen around Y2K. And it can happen any moment. The moment you see a big announcement, just like what we have seen with OpenAI breaking the ice on the ChatGPT, and then several other players following through, we're going to see a similar momentum the moment quantum encryption breaking begins to happen. And it's right around the corner. So there are threats like this all over the place. And this is just one other thing that we're talking about besides the generative AI, right? What else is coming out there? So it's we always have to plan for the unexpected in this business, right? So the best thing that we can do is generally prepared with a very strong defensive posture. Make sure your frameworks, your governance is robust, and you follow it. You keep your users, whom you're protecting. They need to be part of this whole exercise. Your stakeholders need to be very well engaged on a regular basis. So I think there's no one-stop solution for this, but I would say preparedness and being alert constantly, being vigilant is the best way to defend yourself.
Now, on one hand, we are talking about the very volatility in the cybersecurity landscape and the variability in the digital transformation. That is one thing which is a juggling act, it looks like, right? But at the same time, we also could have a balancing act, because on one hand, we are trying to make sure that we prevent any unnecessary outages or any other losses, but at the same time, user experience is something which is what's going to keep the lights on. It's going to bring the customers back again and again, and it help you with the top line. You cannot make it so secure that the user experience suffers, and you can't keep it too loose that the user has no experience at all. What's that fine line that someone has to walk on, and how does one define that fine line?
It's actually a very fine line indeed, and you put it very well in calling it out as such. There's always something new that's coming out, especially with the SaaS providers. A lot of it started with some nice cool tools like Canva that people wanted to embrace, and which we in IT um, sometimes scornfully call as shadow IT, and the shadow IT is, I think, no longer we need to deem it as a shadow IT, in a way that when something goes mainstream, it's no longer a shadow, right? So there are a lot of SaaS services, a lot of interconnected tools that we use today. You use Photoshop on your local computer. You can't do much without connecting to the Creative Cloud, for example, right? And then there are a bunch of other add-ons and libraries that are cloud-based. A lot of content that you need to exchange. If you're a developer, you're using GitHub, GitLab, a lot of cloud stuff. So there's always this challenge where you need to open ports, you need to set up new routes. So we constantly struggle. So what we do nowadays is we take a zero trust approach with taking some level of confidence from users that, look, you have to juggle. You're going to have more authentication prompts. You're going to be challenged more frequently, right? It's not like once you sign in, come in the morning, you join your domain login and everything is nice and dandy until you shut your computer in the night, right? You have to authenticate sometimes during the course of the day, what you call as the conditional access that has come into play nowadays. So you set up rules so that the backend is intelligently querying users based on whatever criteria when it were met. And you have to use some physical security measures like FIDO2 keys. You have to pop in at times. Do you have another biometric authentication when needed? So some of the users have experienced these latencies, mainly out of their own facing disruptions due to attacks and whatnot. So they are more cooperative. But there's always this gap that you need to constantly bridge. So you're trying to explain to them, as and when something new happens. Now we have a drive to introduce FIDO2 for select users. So we are going about explaining to them, it's like you have to prepare a content package to deliver to them, So we use some delivery methods like video, some internal websites to bring them up to speed on how to productively use FIDO2 keys, just like we did for the MFA, right? So it's a continuous journey of communication, familiarization, and we in the back office support function of IT and security, keeping abreast of what's out there, and then also working with OEMs. You're constantly engaging with them because oftentimes, because of the nature of the threats, OEMs are also moving very quickly. They're introducing, sometimes the pace of change is so quick. What we used to see happen in a year, 6 months, is now happening on a monthly basis, right? There are monthly releases that we are dealing with, especially when it comes to security. So the change has been much more aggressive, much more faster. But at the same time, I'm curious to see how generative AI can be leveraged more effectively to give more smoother user experience, by keeping tabs on the security that in a way that a human agent can always do consistently, right? So again, to solve the problem that's brought in by technology, we are trying to see another aspect of technology, how it can help us to smoothen the user experience.
So with that said, you and I both have been around the block, and we've seen that not every time, or like in the past and even today, you do not have a very clean technology stack. You do not have the recent applications where security was kind of, embedded into the DNA, so it is inherently secure. You got a lot of legacy applications that you carry, and
Right.
which makes your digital transformation itself complex. But then at the same time, your cybersecurity enablement across the stack, whichever application you're integrating with, to make sure there is no weak link, and making that happen with the legacy application stack that you might have and systems that you might have. It has been nightmare for many. So do you see any way of circumventing this issue, given that legacy applications and systems are not going away anytime soon? And you do not have a way to directly embed cybersecurity in it. And even on top of it, you also have to carry them to even deliver the user experience. So you've got two things at stake: vulnerability for an organization, or some breach for a customer's data or whatever other form of breaches, and at the same time a user experience. And you got something that is archaic, old, not up to speed, not doesn't have cybersecurity or so-called UX design principles which you could have applied, which will enhance UX experience, and you somehow have to carry it on your back and still deliver a world-class experience. How do you pull something like that off?
When we talk about legacy applications, it is assumed that there would be some level of compromise, both with the agility and also with the experience. And users accept that unless we are bringing some Gen Z into the user base. It happens sometimes, right? But mostly we are able to manage with some pains. The 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 UX aspect is while it's more tougher subject, the user interface cannot be changed so quickly. So we live with that. But the secure access of those legacy applications is something that we can deal with. So we cordon them off onto secure shelves, secure work environments. Sometimes we embrace tools like Citrix or Windows Cloud PC type setup to give them a more contained access. So it's more in a closed atmosphere. Now, in the case of some applications that are way too in the back, you can't really give them such access, and they are really critical for the business. We take the secure APIs, use technologies like OAuth to enable them for secure API pass-through access wherever possible. I've done that for some. And it's a journey, like our focus has now been modernizing the legacy applications to not to have to do any most of that retrofitting. And by and large, we've been successful just for a few last few, I would say maybe about, in my context, may have about 15% of such applications. So by and large, we are comfortable in that. What I see in the industry is that, to your point, that there is still a significant volume, especially you go to governments, some of the legacy or old-time organizations. And I see them also embracing these approaches, and more so with the cybersecurity mandates that you have, especially in the US, where you have more stringent requirements. You have even the SEC is getting involved. If you're a publicly traded company, it's something that we can't take a chance unless we are willing to receive queries and having to explain to SEC type folks. So I think as much as there is this challenge, this gap that we see, but there are also enabling tools. But the real question is, you can solve the problem, but at what cost? So that's something, it depends on the scale. But there are solutions out there that can enable you to refine the UX and to improve the security, even for some of those legacy applications, in case you're constrained to modernize them sooner than later.
But what is that level of risk an organization is willing to accept? because there's nothing like 100% foolproof, secured environment. And at the same time, we do not have a perfect user experience, and we do not have a perfect operational functionality that exists, which will give you the utopic experience overall, right? When you have to balance between less than perfect, and anyways, we all say that good should be the right focus versus perfection, because perfection cannot come in the way of good, and that's how the world works, and that's how life works. So what would you say is an acceptable level of risk one must be ready and also make the case for in front of the management, which they are also willing to accept, so that you get the user experience and get your operational functionality work the way you intend to, and yet and come out as a winner at the end?
Well, I would say the risk out of these is low to medium, depending on the kind of platform and the enabling that we are doing, right? So the acceptable risk for the stakeholders obviously is if not zero, they want to see low on a scale of 1 to 4, right? Which is 1. But it's not always easy. But we don't go past medium risk, mainly due to the lack of upgradability. Some of these platforms, they run in very old OS stacks, and you can't even upgrade the OS in some cases. Even and the pressure can be so high that sometimes you are even using these stacks beyond the extended support periods that you can get from OEMs. So it's always a case by case analysis of what is the risk. So we undertake periodic reviews, and we flag these applications to relevant business owners on the issues that they face, and we present the risks and the opportunities what we have, and we leave it to them to take the final call, because we are not willing to undertake any risk on our own. We can only undertake that when business wants us to say, okay, fine, I can live with that risk. It's low or medium. At least it's not high or critical. So it's more of an interactive approach where we constantly have to assess those risks, and sometimes the risk proposition can change during the course. You assess risk to be at a certain level. 6 months, 12 months down the line, the risk scenario can change. All of a sudden, now you have a critical risk. Then anytime something goes into a critical state, we just shut it down. That's our approach. We just don't want to. We first shut down and then ask questions. Hey, how can we fix this? And business understands that.
So to that end, would you say that are there any very specific or rather overlooked security risks when you're doing digital transformation, which could have a significant impact? And many times, the hindsight is 2020 based on your experience, which
Right.
you would like to call out so that people pay specific attention to as they're going about planning and executing. As you said, even the risk could morph at different stages of what you're doing with your digital transformation. What kind of security risks that you see could kind of sneak in on you almost?
Okay, well, so the risks that we perceive, just to put it down in the operational terms, is change in the business use of those solutions. All of a sudden, you have a solution that's being used by internal staff in the field, and now they want to give it out to some third parties, contractors, or even customer partners that they want them to use them, with some direct access. So those scenarios make it complicated for us. We have seen some of those. Then the technology aspect of it, the way the new technologies can come in, new hacking tools. The generative AI, for example, has been a game-changing tool for both for security and for hackers. The malicious actors are using the Gen AI. We're even seeing the tip of the iceberg. The extent of they are just beginning to get it. Especially with the open source large language models that we have. It's making it easy. Anybody can go download if you have a decent enough computer. The situation is such that you have your own AI engine running in your attic. So that's the level of threats that we have to deal with. So the technology risks play a significant role in this whole dynamic situation. The business requirements, the way business wants to use, roll out to new segments, change their use case scenarios in a way that impacts the security stack. So those would be the biggest challenges. The other possibility in some cases is your financial risks. You might be all of a sudden compelled, with finances, with budgets. There could be intermediate cuts that sometimes we may face due to whatever reason, right? So I would say it can be more around people risks, technology risks, and financial risks.
So one last question. So if you had to have the business leaders, the IT leaders, and security leaders tweak their leadership style, their communication style, their mindsets, and the strategies that they are trying to put in place, where all would you say some finer tweaks are required for them to be able to conduct their digital transformation effort in such a way that not only does it make sure that the cybersecurity risks are minimized, but also the user experience is maximized?
Yes, the most important thing to me is keeping oneself abreast of these developments and regular conversations inside and outside. Get your intel on what's happening in the cyber threat landscape. So it's something that we need to stream all the way up to the board level for them to understand some of these risks. So the communication of these threats, challenges, opportunities, what we have by way of our resources, solutions to defend those threats is becoming more and more relevant and daily topic. That's first and foremost. Then comes the aspect of continuous engaging of users with the way the threats are evolving. We want to keep them continuously educated. So it's almost like we have a channel. Like you want to hear news, you want to switch to the popular news channel, whatever that you prefer, right? Similar to that, cybersecurity and doing a business in a safe way is become a way of life, right? But in the midst of all this, we have to do business, and that's where usability comes into play, right? You have to navigate, you have to keep working through these constraints. So there's still a significant amount of opportunity. It's while it can bring in new learnings, you have to deal with new ways of doing business, but it is nothing totally out of the way. The casualty is the budget. The budget is the one that gets burnt in the middle of all this. But we try to keep things sane, more nimble, with more robust team of talent that we rely upon. We always try to advocate, try to be more long-term minded in all these. So don't do things. Don't be too quirky. Don't be too hasty in embracing. So communication is key. You need to keep them involved, keep them engaged, and it's an interactive process. That's how I see it, and it goes on, and we are in for this lifestyle.
So thank you so much, Prasanna, for sharing your insights about how organizations, as they go about running their digital transformation efforts or even planning for it, they they don't undermine the value of user experience. They overemphasize on the need for cybersecurity, but then they create that ultimate balance so that the outcome of digital transformation, the anticipated outcome, is not shadowed by the risks that we create and the reduction of the user experience, which will make the whole digital transformation effort not as good. So instead, they should be looking at multiple ways, whether it is from planning, strategy, business case development, getting their teams ready, getting their business users ready, and then having that delicate fine line, I'm bringing that word up again, that walk that delicate fine line, that user experience and cybersecurity, they're all handled properly, and we give the world what we want through our digital transformation efforts. So great points that you made. Thank you so much for your input here today.
Thank you, Sanjog. Thanks for having me.
For our audience, please sign up on our social media, then subscribe to our podcast. Thank you again for listening and watching us on CTN. This is your host, Sanjog All, signing off till next week. Take care and God bless.